Today, we want to speak about the learnings from introducing a UX research repository. And while many researchers have maybe seen the value of a central see the value of a central research repository, oftentimes it's not very clear how to introduce one in an organization, so that it really streamlines the UX research settings that exist in that organization, and also really gets used by the different roles who might be interested in working with a research repository or working with a central place where they can access user research data. Today, we have the chance to learn from two researchers who have done this process themselves, and also discuss our learnings later on in smaller groups. So I would like to welcome our two guests tonight. We have Kaj with us. Hi, Kaj. Kaj is a freelancer in UX research and research ops, service design, and more topics, and is currently a UX research lead at Wolters Kluwer, Tax and Accounting Netherlands. This is an information service company for professionals in the health, tech, risk, and other areas in the Netherlands. And she's also, besides that, an instructor for UX design at the UX Academy in Amsterdam. Great to have you here.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you so much for joining. And our second guest is Markéta. Hi, Markéta. Markéta is head of UX at Tipsport, and Tipsport is a Czech betting company. And at Tipsport, Markéta went through different stages of UX research herself. So from UX researcher to team lead to now head of UX. So has different perspectives on this topic as well. She has a background in anthropology, and also worked with as an external instructor at Prague University of Economics and Business, where she gives workshops and lectures about qualitative research. Besides that, she also enjoys photography and is working also for some NGOs in the creative field as well. Great to have you here, Markéta, as well.
Thanks for nice introductions, Sina.
Cool. So our plan for today, I mentioned it before, we plan to structure our conversation today in three parts, or the main conversation in three parts, where we speak about the different facets of introducing a user research repository. We want to start with analyzing the situation that made Kaj and Markéta to start thinking about introducing a user research repository. What was the situation where they started from in the first part? After that, we want to speak more about the details of how they got started with looking at different solutions, and then really how they get started with implementing it in their organizations. And the third part will be about their learnings, what was unexpected, what was harder than they thought, or maybe what was easier than they expected it to be. So we have three main parts. You can ask questions to any of those parts, in general about introducing a research repository. And we want to try something out tonight where how we collect the different questions. So we want to use Mentimeter. This is a tool you can open in the browser, the page that you can see here on the screen. It's called menti.com, and you can enter the digits from the screen here. So you should be able to access our question panel there. If you want, you can also use the smartphone and scan the QR code, and this will bring you to our site here as well. So it's a bit of an experiment. I hope it works. So maybe you can open it, and we will start with an easy question, and to see if it works for you all. And I would like to know, where are you joining us from today? So when you've logged in, you will see a question where you can submit your answer. And here we can see people answering. Nice. Cool, this is working. And I see in the meantime, we also got even more international. So we have people from Mexico, UK, USA, Belgium, Sweden, Germany. That's so nice. Great to have you all here. All right. I think this is working. There's a Q&A session on the site as well, but we will I will introduce you to the different ways to submit your questions once we are in that part. All right. So we want to get started and speak about the pre-repository stage, the starting point that made you think about introducing a research repository. So for my two guests, I would like to know, can you give us an overview of what was going on in your company when you realized that a research repository might be useful? And just one comment before we start speaking about that. You can now submit your questions already about this part via Menti, our tool. Okay, Hi, Markéta. Can you tell us a bit about the situation? Maybe, Kai, do you want to start?
Sure. I started with this company September 2013, and as a starting point, I did some interviews with various stakeholders, about 10 employees in the company, product owners, management, designers. And basically, I found out that this existing customer knowledge, existing research results, they were not easy to find or could not be found at all. So unless you knew the right person, it was pretty difficult to find user insights to use. So that was a moment when I thought, well, we need a central place to find all the reports, results, numbers, etc. Because a lot of people were having customer interactions, product and salespeople, account managers, designers did research. So there was a lot of useful information available. And that was the main starting point that I thought, well, instead of them storing that in personal drives or unfindable company drives, a central place to store the results is really necessary. There was a repository that the team was already using, but it was not shared very well. So there were basically two things that I thought, well, this can be done better.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing. Markéta, how was the situation in your company when you started to think about a research repository?
Right, we were in a position of building a whole new team for UX research, and we needed a tool for qualitative data analysis. So this was the original need from some new app or software to make data analysis easier. But then we realized that we can benefit from this tool in other way, in the way of repository, to simply put all the findings together and have them for the future use, even among other roles, designers, product managers, or copywriters who needed also access to reports from researchers and to videos and recordings from research and other sources of knowledge. So from the tool for data analysis, we went like short way to benefits of a repository.
Thank you. Did you also have already like another solution in place or a way for people to access existing research data when you started looking for a tool, Markéta? Or was this really the starting point to set up something like that?
We had Jira and Confluence, And in Jira, there were all the reports from the past, but the search in Jira is quite complicated and it didn't fit our needs. And the second place to store all the data was SharePoint from Microsoft, but also it was complicated to share it among all the stakeholders from the company. So this was not fitting to our needs.
Yeah. You already mentioned a bit of the expectations you had when you thought about introducing a research repository. Can you tell me a bit more about the main advantages that you saw in having a repository, or what was the main thing you wanted to achieve? Whoever wants to take the question.
Searching the starting point for this. Well, we wanted one place which is able to give all the answers to the questions like, do we know anything about this topic, or do we have some research covering this issue? And before the repository, the place of this knowledge was me and other researchers, and we are only a small team, so it was quite time consuming to do all the search in Jira or SharePoint. So the main advantage was that we can store all the reports and insights in one place, and everyone can use filters or search and do this searching by themselves. And other advantages was better work with highlights and videos during the analysis process. And yes, that were the main advantages for repository.
Cool, thank you. So you already mentioned you started from like having a tool to streamline your analysis, but also like creating a place where people can access to browse existing research data. Cool, thank you. Kai, do you want to add something about like the main advantages that you saw?
Yeah, in our case, it was exactly similar to what Markéta tells, but the other way around. So I started the need to share the knowledge from a central place. But while I was learning about repositories, I learned that there are various types of repositories, as you shared already in your introduction, like an overview, a list of everything that is all reports that are available, but also analysis features. So I learned about contents and similar tools that they existed. So the main advantages that I saw were indeed having more impact with research, because now it could be found and you could search in the, if you would add some tags and other meta information, you could search the thing that you were actually looking for, all about topic X, for example. Mm-hmm. So it can be found, can be used, and potentially can be reused. So yeah, that was one of the values, but also the analysis features, they seem very useful. Now, basically to try to speed up the time to get to the insights. Of course, every researcher has its own way of working. Not everybody might use these tagging transcripts and creating highlights, but that was definitely one of the main advantages that were included in this stage. And having at least the qualitative research in one place, or trying to have it in one place, was also very valuable.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, that's interesting. So you had like different main or challenges that made you think about introducing a research repository, but then kind of discovered, okay, there's more to it, or there are more functions a repository can have, or how a user research repository can support your work actually. And this is how you discovered like the potential impact it might have. Okay, so after you discovered, okay, there's a need and for a research repository, and this could be a good idea. When you started speaking with your team or your colleagues, or promoting the idea in the organization, were there any hesitations in introducing a research repository, or either by yourself or by your colleagues? And how was that?
No, in our case, not really hesitations, because there was already a solution in place, and also Confluence was used in SharePoint. So there were a lot of solutions already, but we were a little bit hesitant about what we needed and what was the best solution and how to start. So there were a lot of, we needed to try a lot and to learn how people might use it by involving them in that process. But there was not hesitation in terms of budget, or if it had any value, that we were convinced about that.
Okay, so you did not
Definitely.
have to convince someone to actually get a repository, because they were kind of like a step ahead.
Yeah, definitely.
How was that for you, Markéta? Did you have to convince someone to get a repository, or how did that work?
It was similar, as Kai said, but we were quite selfish in choosing the right tool for our work. And we needed definitely some work tool, but difficult communication was with our security department, information security department, because they needed to be assured that this tool is something we do not already have. We cannot change it for some other solution we have in the company, and that this is safe solution, and that is a good working app. So we needed to assure them that this is something we really need, and we need it from other sources than we already have.
Yeah, so you kind of had to loop them in very early to make sure that it's possible for you to introduce a repository, right?
Yeah.
Cool, thank you so much. We hear sometimes from people that they maybe fear or are a bit afraid about the big effort of introducing a research repository. Did you have similar thoughts about introducing a new repository or a repository in general? Or what do you think about that, about the time investment in the beginning, maybe?
Not really fear, but I knew it would be a lot of work. So maybe the hesitance then is in starting somewhere and hope that you do the right thing, so you don't have to do it again. Of course, we did some things again and again, but that's okay. You learn while doing.
True. Markéta, do you want to add something to this point?
No, I had so many challenges in front of me at the time when we were introducing the repository, that this was very small issue for me. Just take it, it's a work we have to do, so let's start and we will see the results in the future. And I was sure that we will benefit from it, so I wasn't scared of anything or had some hesitations about that.
Yeah, I think in our case, the hesitation was not about the effort, maybe, or doing the work that is in front of you. You benefit at some point. It's more about the organization around us that was changing a lot. So we hoped that the vision that we had and the organization shared management, that it would still be in place in the long run. So they didn't change their mind, for example.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. To think of the whole organization and how the repository fits in there in the future as well. Cool, thank you so much. I would say we now switch to our questions from our participants. I see you're very active already. Thank you so much. So, this one just ended up here in the wrong field. All right, so you should see the question as well on the screen. Okay, so we got one question. How much time does it add to your day-to-day or week to keep the repository up to date?
You want to take this, Markéta, or shall I? Both.
I have never thought about it from this point of view. I take it as a part of my work, and I would have to keep something up to date in other place, but now I keep it up to date in Condense. So for me, it's no time added to my work day already.
Because you kind of would do the analysis anyway. And
yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe it took some things were easier with repositories, so we save some time, so we can edit to fill the repository with all the insights and reports. This was a big amount of time we needed to invest.
Yeah.
So this is the answer to this question.
Kai, how's this for you?
I
How
think
much time
if
is it?
yeah, to keep it up to date as it is, that doesn't require any extra effort. That's similar to Markéta. I think you save a lot of time by not having to save, for example, a report to SharePoint and share the link through other channels like mail or other chat tools. So that will save you some time. But so it's similar. But keeping it up to date, for example, we now have the repository filled with reports that we produced before, but we would like to change that and to start sharing smaller insights and connect those to reports. And then that will require some extra effort. For example, when you add new small insights and to connect them to the ones that already exist, that might be some extra time. But I'm not sure how much it will be. I don't expect this to be on a weekly basis, a lot of time, and to be able to include it in the work that is already existing.
Yeah, thank you so much. We got a lot of questions, so maybe we'll move to the next one. We got a question about the curation. Can you tell us how you curate the repository and how you make sure other teams will contribute to it? Maybe a quick question to that, is this even the case for you? Like, do other teams contribute to your repository, or is it only the active researchers who bring data into the repository?
At the moment, only researchers add data to the repository. We do have created a workflow for all the teams for potentially for the future. So we identified who is gathering information, who has participant customer interaction and information. But we also identified that the quality is not always good. So it might not be, it needs some thought how to phrase that to be able to put it in, to phrase it as an insight in the repository. So at the moment, it's only researchers.
Yeah.
But I would love to have other people add their information as well.
Who do you think of could be like included, involved here in the future?
Well, it could be marketing research that is valuable for certain topics. Could be product people product people, salespeople, sales and account management.
Yeah. Markéta, how is this for you? Who enters information into your repository?
Same here, only researchers can add data or contribute to the repository. I don't think that our company is on this level of UX or research maturity to use such tool by themselves, but I believe we will make it to this level sometime in the future. So far, we are a team of 4 researchers, and we are the only one who can add who can contribute to the repository.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. So that it kind of like can evolve how you use the repository, and also that it's not as easy to just open it up for everyone to add data, because you kind of have to find out a way to really enter the information you need, and so that you can use it in the future. And maybe there are different steps to include different teams here and bring them as an active user into the repository, and not just on the have them on the consuming side. Thank you so much. Okay, next question. How granular does your labeling need to be to help you find what you need without there being too much noise? Okay, so this is about like the labeling, or how you, maybe there are different words for labeling, like tags or codes, depending on the repository, or also like contextual information. So like a system that helps you to find information. And we have a question about like how detailed you kind of created the system, so you find what you're looking for if you come into the repository. Do you want to share a bit about how you approached the topic here? Kai is nodding already. Do you want to
Yeah, sure.
take this one?
Yeah, I'm reading the question again. How granular does it need to be to help you find what you need? So we created several layers of tags and labels. One layer is to categorize reports on a high level, which means, for example, it would be a label would be the method, or which part of the journey this applies to, or a certain customer segment. So it's very, very broad, and it's already very useful. For example, for product managers, product people, to be directed to the report that might be useful for them. But of course, if you're, for example, designer working on a detailed topic, then it might be much more useful to also have labels about the specific areas in the product. I don't know, a login area, or another page that is very very specific. We use that in the labels, in the tags, to highlight certain stuff, but we don't use it to search in a repository at the moment.
Yeah, I think like that's a good point, to also have like kind of like a high level tagging or coding or adding contextual information to, like, when you start looking for information, to kind of distill down the information you already have, right from the beginning by the method, for example. Markéta, do you want to add something about the labeling, or how you approached finding information in the repository?
Yeah, we started with like small granularity with the labeling the projects, like the cover notes for one project. But recently we redesigned it, so now it's more detailed, and this is helpful for other stakeholders to find what they need in the repository. So we tag each report or artifact by UX designer or copywriter or business analyst, and like people involved in the project, by the section we made it for, because our company is divided into 7 sections. So this label is helpful for other people to find what they need, and other labels are like method or technique used for the research, or the version in we made it. So this is still something living, or it's growing organically, and I think we will need to make some assessment for this in the future, like we made it recently. So after the feedback from the stakeholders, maybe we will change it again. So you need to find something which is fitting to your environment or your company, because our company is quite complicated in terms of organization. So our granularity will be different than in other company or other product.
Yeah, that's interesting. So like it's definitely the whole labeling or the way of how you find information is something that can change once you really use the repository, or maybe the organization changed. So it kind of needs to be flexible here. And also you mentioned another important point, I think, about thinking of who wants to find information. So it's not always the researcher, but maybe like product managers or other roles, UX designers, who don't necessarily like enter new research data here, but maybe access the repository to find existing reports or existing insights. So maybe we can take a look at this question as well. So we got a question about who is the audience for the repository. So you both mentioned that at the moment only like the researchers add new data, but who maybe opens the repository or looks at the data there in the organizations.
For us, it's like 4 types of audience. Designers are the first. The second is copywriters, then product managers, and occasionally project managers.
And how's this for you, Kai?
Similar, different groups. So people that need information to make decisions, for example, like designers or product owners. I think that would be the first target group. And ourselves as for the, so that is for the insights and for the access to the whole repository to store the data. That's definitely researchers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But of course, also there are also more people that are not as involved. So that's maybe higher management that have access to the stakeholder side of the repository, like Alex showed in the beginning. That would be, I think, the second or third target group.
Yeah, so different groups who, even if you're in a stage where only researchers add data, but different groups who kind of like can access the data in the repository, or maybe only like part of it. So maybe not information about the participants or any raw recordings from interviews, but only like the reports or finalized insights. Thank you so much for sharing.
And actually, we also have, we use this, we use Condense as a well, with all the features that were already discussed, but we also have an overview in Confluence still for other data sources. So that could be from data science people, could be marketing reports that not necessarily have their results in Condense. So we sort of have a, well, let's call it a library, a list of all the things that we know that exist, which are also useful for other people in other parts of the company, and then do not necessarily have access to Condense yet.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, I think it's important to also see like the whole tool landscape within your organization as part of like a step when you introduce like a research repository. How does this connect with like the other tools that are there or other data you collect besides the research data? Maybe one more question from the audience before we move on to our second part. Okay, so maybe we take this one. How do you work with secondary research? Are these research insights also added or linked to your research repository? Do you want to? Yeah. So secondary research,
Yeah, how do we?
working with, I would like understand it as working with research data that you maybe already like gathered in the past, or that is already available to your organization without conducting new research sessions. So basically using the repository as a starting point, or the data that is in the repository, instead of coming in with a question and then start a new research study to find an answer to that.
Yeah, of course, if there's a new question, then people, I would encourage people to take a look at what is already there without starting new research. And I'm not sure if that's always the case in our organization, but if you read a question as if I would do desk research, so for example, a trend report that is, and which might be relevant for some situation, that is also added to the research repository.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, imagine that this is the PDF of this report. It's not tagged everything in the content, but it does. Yeah, it is added to the repository, and the main tags that are also applied to other reports, a country, a target group, or segment, or a method, or which touch point, or which journey phase, that is added to those trend reports, for example, market research.
Yeah, so it's a mix of like you try to use the repository as a starting point to also kind of use the information that is there and maybe decide if you need to gather new data. But that's not always like 100% the case, or sometimes you might or you're getting there.
I hope so.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. I would suggest that we move on to our second part to speak more about like how you actually got started with introducing the repository. Thank you so much, everyone, for asking those fantastic questions. We still have time to go through the open ones later, but for now we move to our second part. So we want to speak about how you actually got started with introducing the repository. Can you tell me a bit more, or us a bit more about how you evaluated different tools or solutions, and what about your criteria?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
Basically, we had some criteria. The researchers had some criteria. We also involved some product owners, and for example, how they would search for specific information, and what they would do. So there were also some criteria. Like Markéta, we had the criteria: security and privacy should be in place, preferably the data in Europe. Specifically, we needed for the transcriptions that it would be almost perfect in Dutch. Which is not always the case with in other solutions. Of course, it should be easy to use, and especially people who are not using these tools should easily find their way in the tool itself. And there were some criteria about user management. For example, like you shared, that some users can see everything and other users might not see, for example, participants or raw data, those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did, we created dummy data and added it to I think three of the same similar tools, and try what the results were. So for example, the result of a transcription in Dutch, in English, in German, and compare those transcriptions, and started a trial for all of them to see it in action, because it can look nice, but if it doesn't work very well, then it's something else. So a trial, and also what was very important for me was a conversation with contact person about the philosophy of the tool. So that I felt confident about developments in the future, new features that might be on the roadmap, or the way of thinking about the structure of the tool, that this is a good choice. I think that helped me a lot.
Markéta, how did you evaluate different solutions or tools?
We had a list of different tools similar to Condense, and we decided to prefer something which is simple to use, which will be easy to use for other stakeholders, not only for researchers for the future. And also, as I mentioned, the information security department, they had some list of their needs from this point of view. And then well, that was all, I think, but the process was quite long, so in the end I just wanted to have at least something which would be working. And at this time the offer of Czech transcription came, so that was something which was amazing for us, because transcriptions in Czech language were not very common in the world, in the tools. I think you were the first one who introduced it.
So we have some definitely things or must have, like transcription you were both looking for, and other things. So you had basically a list of criteria to start looking at tools and testing it by yourself.
I think also the list of criteria grew while we were testing the solutions. Of course, then you find out that this is also included. So this is awesome. That should have of course we should have this. And so then we started all over.
Yeah, I can imagine that. So once you discover something, you want to make sure you have it, no matter which solution you end up with. Cool. So, and once you decided for a tool for a research repository, how or where did you start in terms of implementation internally? Can you give us a little overview over steps, who was involved there, and how you actually introduced the tool?
Well, I remember that when we got it, I looked on the blank page and so what now? But then we started to fill it with the old content from the past. So, and also like at the same time we were doing new researches, so we needed to make a decision how to label and how to structure all the projects. So we needed to look what is our organization of work and what is our organization of the documents. So we created some template how to structure each project, and there were some misleadings or blind paths, but then I think we created a good working environment for us. So it was short way to find out how to use the Condense itself.
Kaj, how did you get started? Was there also a moment where you kind of had a tool and then asked yourself, okay, what to do next?
What next? Yeah, we thought we wanted to start small. So now that we had only the dummy data and the example projects in there, so we started to move some projects into Condense to learn how that would work, and also in terms of, for example, templates or structure that Markéta mentioned. And we didn't want to move all the stuff immediately. yeah, so we started to move some projects, usability study, an interview, also an NPS research from the year before, just to learn how we could use the tool and how we could use the charts, for example, and the tags, and then create a tagging structure and some simple templates, and decided to use it for a few months and see if it really was working well.
You
Of course,
mentioned already.
Yeah.
Please go.
No, I think that was a starting point, and then of course getting feedback from the team.
Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned already like introducing structures or templates, and also a taxonomy. So like the text you want to use, or codes you want to use in your repository. We also, like in advance, we asked you to, if you have questions, you could already send us them in advance. And we got one question about the taxonomies. Could you maybe give a little bit of an insight of how you set up your taxonomy in the beginning? How did you do that? How did you came to the first set of text?
Good question. If I remember well, then we tried to find some examples of how other people use taxonomies, and of course some were very simple and some were very extensive. So yeah, what to do about that? We tried to keep it simple and create a few layers of for the tagging taxonomy. So for the reports, only for the reports, and for creating highlights, it was some general tags. So for example, pains and gains, or positive and negative feedback. And we try to limit ourselves to, and then just stop there, start using it. And that's where we are now, still using it and adapting it.
Yeah, thank you. And it's kind of like we had a follow-up question to that. You kind of already answered it. It was, do you get confused sometimes when analyzing and need to edit the taxonomy?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
So
we are changing it, not constantly, but we learn constantly. And then at some point we have to make up our mind what was useful and what not.
Yeah, makes sense. Markéta, how was this for you? How did you come to your first taxonomy or first set of text?
Well, to be honest, it's growing organically, and this is something we will work on in the future, because, as I said, the product we are working on is quite complicated and complex, and so far we don't have any taxonomy or system how to work with it. We take we are coding each project uniquely, so maybe after some time we will check all the tags we used or codes we used, and then we will create some kind of taxonomy for the future, for some secondary research or discovery research. But so far it's not something crucial for us. We need to work on other issues. So that's the state of taxonomy in Tipsport.
Yeah, interesting. So, but yeah, also like very interesting. So that for like different project, it kind of you will come to like a taxonomy once you start analyzing the data, and kind of based from the data, you kind of like come up with like tags for that. But there can be like different taxonomies for like individual projects, or maybe something that is relevant for multiple projects, or even like all user research data here as well. We got another question in advance from our participants, and it's about like the internal communication and how you maybe share the information that you now have a research repository in your organization. How did you announce that? And follow-up question: how do you encourage your company to access the repository?
So the question is, how did we announce the repository?
Maybe we start with that. Maybe we start with that one. Yeah. How did you share the information that there is a research repository? Was it like a step-by-step or a big announcement for the whole organization? How did you communicate that?
Well, the whole organization isn't that big. For when we started with the repository, it was just one business unit. That has changed in the meanwhile, but we introduced it just very simple. Like we were just moving the files to this new place, and this gives you opportunity, for example, to search in the content or well, with by various tags that we use, and that was it. And we also share every new piece of research that is in there, either automatically or by adding a small message in the Slack channel in this case.
Yeah, so kind of like repeating the information or showing by like an actual report or like a new insight, sharing a link that brings people into the repository.
Exactly.
Yeah. Markéta, how did you communicate the new repository internally?
The first thing was that we sent an email to the list of stakeholders we thought that they might be interested in, and we put the link on the article on the internet. In this article was some simple guide or it was like simple guide how to use the repository from the point of view of the stakeholder. So this was the first step, but then we realized that the best promo is the meeting where you are delivering insights from the research, because after each research we made some short call or meeting where we are presenting the findings, and during this we were doing some promo action for the repository and offering the possibility to become the stakeholder in the tool. And this is, I think, the best way how to get all the stakeholders into it. And then we need to share the link to the report to Jira, so the stakeholder can push the issue in Jira to other states. So this is some next way how to promote that there is some place like repository.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like the last question from our side, then we get back to like the questions from our audience. But actually, like this question also was sent by like a participant in advance. It's about the what kind of information do you keep inside your repository and what goes to other places? Can you share a bit about, like, for example, interview guides? Do they end up in the repository, or are they in other shared docs or any other places? How is this for you?
What other information did you mention?
Like interview guides, for example,
yeah.
or a research plan, like additional information besides like the actual, maybe like recording or the final report. How is this for you? Does everything come into the repository, or is there still some information living in other places?
Well, there's a lot of information living in other places, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Sometimes we create research plan, and the idea is to have as much as possible in condensed, but the organization is now a little bit bigger. Other business units are also served, so also other tools are used similar to condensed. So sometimes it's condensed, sometimes it's something else. So then also a research plan is in another place. But imagine that the central point, the idea of central point is still condensed. Then the plan should be there. The script often is in Confluence. So it's easy to co-create it with the team or another text editor. For example, video recordings, it also not always the same tool is used. So they might live in the SharePoint of the company, the original, but they're always added to Condense. But then still a backup somewhere is kept. Yeah, I think that those are the biggest other things. What other things can we imagine? Oh, participant list, for example, who joined the research. They are in another place. So we have a SharePoint, Confluence, and this.
Different tools, but the idea to kind of connect it back to a central place, or have like links to that from there. Yeah. Do you want to add anything to that, Markéta?
I will not bring anything new into this topic. Information about participants are always stored in our SharePoint or our own system. So we do not put any information about participants into repository. Recordings, it's the same as Kaj mentioned. They are created in Teams and in Microsoft Stream. So we just download it and put it in the repository. So this is also on the two different places. And we are making some kind of backup of the findings, not findings, but we also make notes during the interview, and we make them in Word during the session, and then we make a copy in the Condense. So it's also on the SharePoint, and final report is also copied in the SharePoint. We have like for each document we have two places, repository and the SharePoint.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Okay, I think we can now take a look at the questions from our participants again. So we answered that one. We got an upvoted question. I don't know how easy it is to answer that one, but it's about like personal information that identifies a person. How do you keep that personal information aligned in your repository to ensure GDPR standards, like, for example, the right to forget? So we have a question about how do you make sure that your repository or the data in your repository is GDPR compliant. It's a tough one. Maybe you want to share something about that?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, Kaj.
After you.
I just wanted to say that, as I mentioned, we do not store any personal information about people in the Condense. There are only no personal information in Condense, only information about research and projects and design or stuff like that. But there are no names or addresses or data. No, not in our company.
Yeah, so that's also like one way to kind of like only bring in the data that is already kind of not refers back to one specific person from the beginning. Yeah.
Same here. We except for when, of course, somebody, the participant mentions their name during the interview, then of course you have the name in the data in the video recording. When it's in the beginning of a recording or at the end, we try to crop it so that it's not there. For example, also sometimes in the beginning of a meeting, you have the title of the meeting with the participants. We also try to crop that so that it's not visible. And for the rest, it's same as Markéta. There's no personal information in the, or at least the policies that there's no personal information in the repository, except for, no personal information, but all participants have a unique code. So we can track back all the data from a specific person, but the original information is somewhere else. So in case somebody says, I want to be forgotten and please remove all my recordings, that is possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also all our recordings are deleted after 6 months. So even if you have the access to the report where are links to the recordings, you cannot see them anymore after 6 months from the date of the research.
So thank you so much for sharing. So we have different ways of how to make sure that there's that is GDPR compliant, or that the data of user, either if they want to, if they ask us to remove the data, or after like a certain time that you agreed on, how you can remove the information about a single person from the repository. Maybe like from our experience of like from other customers. What is also interesting here is like the perspective of who can access the like full repository, including participant data and raw data, and who can access a more curated and more controlled part of the repository, where researchers can say, we want to show participant names here, we want to include that information, or they can also have the control over what not to include here. So that's also like one way of how to make sure to handle participant data securely here. Thank you so much. Okay, we will look at maybe another question we have. Thank you so much for sharing. It's a long list already. I think we already answered a few of them. 1 second. Or maybe I think we also have in our Zoom chat one.
Yeah, actually, Fina, we have a follow-up question to one of the questions, like in the first part, from Aisha to Kai. Maybe she can voice it herself, or I can read it as she prefers. Okay.
Maybe you can read it.
Yeah, sure. I can read it. So Aisha asks, so about the question, audience for repository question, answered by Kai. Do you share this library list of other teams' reports as a published report? And do you do any tagging on other teams' reports that you pull into Condense?
The list of everything, of all the research, also outside of Condense, is actually not in Condense, but in Confluence. So it's published, but not in Condense. And we do not tag the data itself at the moment of the for example, the trend report or the market research. Not yet.
Thank you. Also, thank you, Chala. Was there another question from the chat in Zoom? Oh.
Yeah, there's one more question. It's from Chris. How do you organize raw data? Do you use Excel or Miro?
Or do you use another tool?
What could we mean with organize the raw data? As in after creating highlights in the transcriptions, or?
So you like raw data, like for example, from like an interview study or usability test, probably have some notes, maybe a recording, maybe also a bit of some quantitative information as well. You both already mentioned that you kind of either from the beginning it was your plan to analyze the data within the tool, within the repository tool, or you discovered this while you were looking for a repository tool. So I'm assuming that you kind of start organizing, bring the raw data to your repository and start organizing it there. Or do you use other tools in between?
No, also other tools are used. For example, Mio. Yeah, definitely.
So you use that as a step before bringing the data to the research repository or later on?
Sometimes multiple people make notes and then we organize it there first, but also sometimes we export highlights of a lot of videos and then organize those there.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so we will move on to our third part. I think it's called the learnings, but actually we already talked a bit about the learnings and your experience from the process of going there. But so feel free to ask new questions. Menti, we have a bit of time for that as well in the end. So Kaj and Markéta, can you maybe, did you have any unexpected or what learning have you made since introducing the repository? Was there anything unexpected or surprising?
I've learned that stakeholders didn't read the article with the guide how to use it. So I need to make some workshop maybe to show them filters, because they didn't know they can use filters to browse through the repository. It was finding for me.
Yeah, so you had to kind of onboard them in a workshop. Anything else was surprising for you? Kaj, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I can do in between while Markéta is thinking. Yeah, for me, it is a really difficult topic and it's also changing all the time. The organization is changing, the team is changing, our ways of working are changing. And so also the use of the repository is changing. And that it requires a lot, of attention. So not necessarily the question from the beginning that it adds to organize the repository data itself necessarily, but thinking about how do we want to use it, who should be involved, how should tags be organized, should we open up to other business units as well, then who has access. Yeah, quite, I think it's quite, it requires a lot of attention. And we learned that sometimes I reached out to Condense, well, asking what I perceived as a missing feature, but then we got talking about it and then, well, what do you actually need? And then often it was also a gap in our own process that we, for example, haven't really defined how to define an insight. So that really helped as well.
Yeah, so interesting. So there are things that come up, like for example, you can get started easily, but then more detailed questions will come up. Like for example, what is an insight for you and your organization, and how you want to have the scope.
Or who should have access to what kind of data? So is that that was also not really clear in our policy. Yeah.
So this was kind of a bit more difficult, or than maybe expected in the beginning. Was there anything else that was more difficult than you thought when introducing the repository? Or maybe you already shared something. We can take a look at the other perspective. Was there something that was easier than you thought?
Yeah, there's something that was easier and that I would do also differently in if I would do it again. So we started small, moving only some reports to Condense to learn how it worked. And if I would do it again, I would move it all into Condense at once or as soon as possible. So you really see the value of searching through all the data. And that is that it was easier to add it all to Condense. So I would definitely do that more early.
How's the status there now? Have you moved all the existing data to your repository, or okay?
Yeah, we did.
Is there anything else that now that you look back and reflect on the process of introducing the repository? Anything you would do differently in hindsight besides that, maybe?
Maybe I would do the onboarding sooner, not after a few months of running the whole project.
You mean the onboarding with your stakeholders or other teams?
Yeah.
Or
and that the next thing I was surprised that in the past many product owners were interested in research findings, and they wanted to browse through the data or reports, but we didn't have this tool. But now we have it, and new product owners and new product managers are interested in. But it was not like surprising, because they are new in their position or in the company, so they need to look to the history of the research. They need it for their work. But I was expecting that also the old, not old, but people who worked for the company for the longer time will be more interested in this, but they are not so much as I expected.
Yeah, also like an interesting topic when new people join the company and you want to kind of make user research data a part of the onboarding, how to handle that comes up. And with the research repository, this might be a way to kind of help them to engage with some user research data and access that.
Yeah, good point.
Do you think of anything else that you would maybe do differently in hindsight now that you've gone through the process? All right. Markéta, you already mentioned like different, maybe like a little bit of gave a little bit of an outlook of what are you about the next steps. So like my question would be, now that you introduced the repository, is it kind of done, or do you have any next step you see for the implementation? Anything you want your repository to evolve to?
Well, I think it's a living organism. So as the Condense is growing and developing, so we need to grow and develop our work. So I don't think that this work will be finished sometimes. We will still have new challenges and new topics to cover. So we started with like MVP, and we will build a big mechanism to make our work maybe easier in some way, but also more complicated in other way, more structured, more detailed, and more sophisticated.
Yeah, makes sense. So it's not done, kind of like an organism that develops and grows and adapts to the needs of your research and your organization. Kai, do you want to have something to add about like potential next steps you see for the implementation of a research repository?
Yeah, definitely. But I think what we can improve, and it links to the topic before, is to have the data have the data used. So have people visit the repository and browse the reports and find their insights and to learn if they can find it or not. And now that we have, since a couple of months, we receive usage data from Condensed, and it really shows that that is necessary in our case. So there's a lot. I got some good tips already from these conversations how to have people visit. So I think that is important. Improve the existing, and then of course, like Markéta says, Condensed is also developing, so we have to keep up. I think one of the things is also to improve the consistency of what is already in there, standardized insights, standardized reports. So it's with the goals that it's easier to find the information that people need.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your, like, how you want to continue introducing or implementing the repository. I mean, you already introduced it. Thank you so much. I just took a look at our questions. Like in the last minutes, we did not get any new questions. We still have a few from earlier that are open. So I will, I hope we can maybe answer them or speak about some of them in smaller groups now in our breakout rooms. And maybe we will like share a recording with you afterwards. And in summary, maybe we can collect answers to the open questions here as well and provide the answers to you later on. Thank you so much for asking all your questions. But now we want to have time as well to get to know you a bit more, maybe make it easier for you to speak in smaller groups and share your experiences of introducing a research repository or your questions you have about that. So we will now move into like 3 different breakout rooms. Before that, before we kind of go into different areas, I want to say a big thank you to Kaj and Markéta already for joining us today and sharing your experience with us. Oh, and we see
You're welcome.
We see some clips already. So I will share also some links with you in the chat now. If you want to stay in touch for future events. Also, like from one of your questions, I saw you asked them if you can see how a repository is organized as an example. So I think it could be also like an interesting topic for like a future event. So we'll take that into consideration. And of course, if you want to see how a repository can look like in Condensed, you can reach out to us and we are happy to do like a personal tour where we can show you with some data how like the repository actually could look like as well. So you find some links in the chat as well. We have also have a mailing list you can join where we share about like upcoming events, and we have a meetup group where we regularly organize get-togethers and online meetups.